Welcome, everybody, to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We are glad to be here. We're glad to have you with us. This is our final show of 2023.
Yep.
We'll be launching officially on all the podcast platforms just before we roll into 2024. And as we have no proof that 2024 is a real year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some precedent to say that it's legit.
Yes.
But it doesn't sound like a real year. And so far it hasn't happened. So we don't really have any proof that it does exist.
We may run out of memory in the simulation's memory buffer. It may just end.
Yeah, we may be done. Yeah, the simulation may end. It may be done. Guys, Christmas, we made it through Christmas. Made it through the holiday season. We're going to recap the year in beer. There's been a lot go on this year. Some good, some a lot, to be honest, not great. So, but we're hanging in there the best we can. I say we really didn't get the worst of it other than losing some breweries that we really liked. But we had a lot of friends really badly impacted by things. But, let's start this off on a little more positive note. Brian, as you were digging around there, one thing you stumbled on was Untappd's top 10 highest average rated beer styles for the year.
Yes.
And it's always fun to look at these and see what's taken the top spot, how these styles stay the same and how they change over the years. So what do we got, Brian?
Yeah. So these are the styles, not individual beers themselves. So there are a lot of ties, and the difference between the styles' average ratings are like hundredths of a point. So a lot of that. At number 10, we've got Sizer Mead, which is mead made with apple juice or other cider, I guess, if it's, I don't know. I guess you can add existing cider to it already. I don't know. Anyway, that's at 4.09 on average. There is a two-way tie for position number 8 at 4.11. And the one of them I'm really intrigued by, it's rye wine, which is like a barley wine, except it's predominantly a rye-based grain beer. And the other one is something that we've made as homebrewers a fair amount. That's Mellow Mel mead. So a fruited mead. And
now, Brian, I want to jump back to your number 10 real quick, because you mentioned juice or cider. Now, remember, cider is not inherently alcoholic.
That's true.
There is a juice and I don't know the difference. Nate, do you have any idea the difference in juice and cider? So
not really.
Why don't you hit the Google for us so we can drop some knowledge? So ask Google Bart. It's really good about that kind of stuff. But
I wonder if it's a spice issue. Like if you add spices to it, it goes from being a juice to a cider.
I think it's something with the processing, with the way they do it. But I'm not.
Yeah, it says here apple cider is fresh and unfiltered, often unpasteurized, whereas apple juice is filtered, pasteurized, and a little bit sweeter.
There you go. I thought it might be that it was the raw stuff, man, that's a cider. So just crush those apples and drink away.
All right.
So there we go. Moving right along.
Okay, cool. And then we're going into number 7 spot. That's the Imperial or Double Oatmeal Stout, and that is 4.12 on average on Untappd. There is a two-way tie again, and that they're both competing for spot number 5. That's Imperial Double Stout and the Quadruple IPA, which I happen to have one of those for today. Both of those are coming in at 4.14. Is a three-way tie for the number 2 spot, and English barley wine, pastry stouts, Imperial Double or pastry stouts, and Imperial Double coffee stouts. So stouts again are big on the list. All three of these are coming in at 4.15. And the winner overall is the Triple New England Hazy IPA at 4.21. It's a pretty big jump from the ones at the number 2 spot. It's 4.21 versus 4.15. It's the biggest jump from one style to the next. And it is up from 4.19 in 2022.
Interesting. Okay. It's... I don't guess I'm surprised here, but I think a lot of times these bigger beers and like having mead in the list. I mean, I know Untappd kind of covers, like it says, top rated beer styles. I mean, and you've got mead and meads, sizers, mellow mels on there. So little out of their their league there, but I think these big beers like this typically do get better ratings as a generality. You get these big boozy beasts out there. Interesting list. Okay.
Yeah.
Barley wine, not too surprised. Imperial pastry stout, of course. Adding oatmeal stout. I mean, a lot of them are just kind of different iterations of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. It's and I've seen stuff in Untappd, and this reminds me of that, where people would say, "Oh, this is great, but I don't rate like a lager above a certain number." So I think I think we've got styles that have that problem. People will rate hazy IPAs and big stouts up to like a 5-point rating, but for some reason they could have just an absolute killer Pilsner, but they're like, they just, for a bias against a style, just won't rate it above like a 4.0. Like I don't know why that is. It's I think it's a reflection of overall their feelings on the style, not the execution of the style. And so that's why these are interesting, but also kind of skewed.
Well, these are also going to bring a lot more flavor and character to the party. These big styles, big malty beers, pastry stouts. You've got a triple New England IPA there. So that's going to be a lot of malt. You're probably going to have some booziness to it if you're getting in that triple territory. You got the big juice notes to it. So you're going to have the mouthfeel. You're going to have some booze aspect to it. You're going to have that big behemoth, juicy, fruity notes there. So I guess there's beers that you drink and you just enjoy them, but these will just bring a little more to your palate, I guess. So I get it.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Interesting. Always interesting to take a look at this, no matter how insane it may seem. So, guys, right into our beers of the week, what we're sipping on to wrap the year up. Brian, as always, Brian likes to pregame. It's not enough that we're going to be drinking on the show. He's like, you know what? I'm going to get started. So a little Bitburger premium pills to get him started there. Got an interesting collaboration here. Creature Comforts, and this is a collaboration with Our Culture Brewing. This is Seeds Take Up the Soils, which is a sweet potato ale brewed with sorghum, vanilla, and spices. We're going to talk more, not on this show, but about Our Culture in the future. They were on as part of our Leaders of the Brew School show that we had on a couple of years ago, just talking about minority brewers, black brewers in the community and what these folks are doing. And there's a big initiative outside of just that collaboration beer that they've done with Creature Comfort. So a lot of cool stuff to talk about there. From Spyglass Hydrodynamics, which is a quadruple IPA there, the big boy. Untitled Art, Nate has got a black seltzer. Nate, tell me about that. What in the world is a black seltzer?
So they used fresh puree in it. My roommate tried it, and he said it reminded him of a purple monster. He said it had notes of apple, and I said that I got boysenberry in it. It just had like some real dark fruit flavors to it. Surprisingly enough, it was actually pretty heavy for a seltzer, 7%, which I was shocked by. And the liquid itself was black, which was very interesting.
Now, you said that Party Nate said it reminded him of a purple monster, and I do not know what a purple monster is. So am I supposed to know what a purple monster is?
He said that it had mango, banana, apple, cherry, cranberry, and the purple monster was called mixed. 2 X's.
Purple, you have not answered my question.
Like Monster Energy drink? Is that
yes, I'm sorry.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Like Monster Energy, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
There we go. All right. It had this. I'm still not with it there. It's okay. We'll get there, Nate. We'll get there.
It's not Grimace.
I figured it had to be that. Yeah. I'm like, what else could it be? I've showing my age, I first thought of Grimace from McDonald's, and I'm like, wait, what? They taste like it. What does this even mean? But,
didn't Grimace have a shake that was like killing people or something earlier this year?
That came out this year.
Those lines, yeah. Also from Parish Brewing, Nate's got a Ghost Prime, which is a cryo hopped DIPA. I am actually going a little bit lighter, sort of here. In honor of one of our stories, I have an Anchor Steam beer here, a little classic Anchor Steam, which is just a good drinking beer. And because I do not let the seasons tell me how to live my life, I have a Sierra Nevada Summerfest that I found in the fridge. So it should still be okay. It's lived in the fridge this whole time. And to really step things up here, one of our favorite local distilleries and one of our favorite local breweries did a collaboration recently. For those watching the live stream, you can see the bottle I've got up here. This is called Outlier number 19 from Independent Distilling. And it is a collaboration with Three Taverns Brewery, where they took their Helm's Deep, which is a big stout, and they distilled some of it into a beer schnapps. So this is they did a very special release, very limited number. I think these are numbered bottles, Brian, if I remember, 75 bottles total released. So very small batch stuff. I think Brian bought like 10 of them because he's a hoarder like that. So, but those are fun. They've done a couple other beer schnapps in the past that were fun, and some other really nice spirits. So I've got a little bit of that with me to take 2023 on out of here. So going to enjoy that.
Nice. Well done.
Well, guys, 2023, a lot to look back on here. We kind of itemized chronologically the big stories that we talked about throughout the year, threw in some other things. But if we go all the way back to January of this year, nearly a year ago, the big story was New Belgium changed Fat Tire. And that caused quite an uproar there. So, Brian, have you seen, how did this all shake out with the changes in Fat Tire?
So there was a lot of talk about it initially, and some people tried it, and I didn't see really any updates. It happened sort of the same way that Sam Adams around the same time reformulated their Boston Lager. There was a lot of kerfuffle about it not being the same thing, and then it just kind of went away because it was, I don't know, it was January. So I haven't seen anybody really reference it other than it happened and that was a thing, and that's all there was. So it was their flagship beer for 30 years, and it was declining in sales. I think they had to revitalize it. So I think that for the majority of people that drink the beer or just drink casually, I think it went unnoticed mostly. I think people just thought it was like a brand refresh. So that's what it seems to be. I'm still sad about it because I've been nursing the last couple that I have. I picked up when the announcement hit because, well, there's a lot of nostalgia in that beer. But
now let me ask you this question, Brian. Prior to the change and prior to going to you saying to yourself, oh my gosh, they changed one of my favorite beers from back in the day. When was the last time prior to that you had a Fat Tire?
It had been a while. Probably in the years, probably.
Yeah, right. So that's my thing. I think a lot of people have the nostalgia connection, and no argument there because I do as well. I thought the same thing. You know, Fat Tire was one of the early craft beers, and Brian, like you and I have talked about, there were times when you'd make a run to Tennessee to get Fat Tire because it wasn't available in Georgia at the time. And no doubt that there were people who Fat Tire was their go-to, was their daily drinker that they loved. But obviously, if New Belgium was changing it, there wasn't that many of those folks left out there. So we got an old and a new version of the beer right as it changed over, and tried them side by side. And in my opinion, the new one was maybe a little lighter, a little bit more drinkable, but definitely felt like it was in the Fat Tire family. You know, maybe a little more athletic brother to the Fat Tire.
It's similarities there. Yeah. I thought, and I thought they were both decent beers. I just think that the original is better. But I mean, again, a bias, nostalgia, that sort of thing, weighing in heavily on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they made the change for a reason. You know, you have to know these big brewers are doing this, and you know, no one has ever made a huge change like that and it'd been a mistake. I mean, not like any big soda brand or anything that changed their original formula and had backlash. You know, it's always done for a good reason.
I had been thinking that there would be at some point in the future a reissue of that on a limited basis, like we're going to re-release a limited run of the original to try to reel people in. At the time this happened, I'm like, this could actually be brilliant because the people that drank Fat Tire are going to notice a difference but they're probably going to find it acceptable enough that they keep drinking it. The people who have nostalgia for it went out and bought all the remaining stock, and then they're going to, if they re-release it at some point on a limited basis, they'll run out and get it again just because of the nostalgia. So you've
McRib marketing, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
It works well. Yeah,
the liquid McRib here. So this could be brilliant. It really could.
Well, a local one that's a good example of that, Sweetwater's Exodus Porter. That beer won medals, and like right after it won a medal, they discontinued it. And every now and then it'll pop back up at the tap room. It showed up at 420 Fest a few years ago. And when it does, I'm excited to see it. That's a really good porter. But I don't know. I didn't keep it in stock in the house before they discontinued it. So, I'm part of the problem, Brian. Definitely.
Yeah. And it had the issue of being a great beer, but it not being a super exciting beer in an era where everybody was releasing new and exciting beers constantly and still are really, but like it was growing. So it was very easy to be distracted by the new things and the mind blowing new styles. So a well-made porter is easy to forget about. So right. Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then moving right along, this one hit us personally. So, we're going to cover that to us, it was one of the biggest beer stories of 2023, maybe not to the country or the larger craft beer community as a whole, but one of our favorite breweries here in Atlanta, a good friend of ours, Jason Pellet, was the owner. Orpheus Brewing closes the brewery and tap room. So that was a big one. And I think we'd seen a couple other closures and we've seen more since then, but that was one I think that had a pretty cult following and did some really unique and interesting beers, big stouts, like true wild ales. He did the Methode Traditionale, types of lambic style and goose style beers. He did big barrel aged stouts. He would do crazy stuff like putting coconuts in a steam cabinet or in a slow cooker for 3 months to make black coconut to put into a stout. So he really did some amazing things with that. And, I don't have like any details if there was a specific thing that hit there, but he did go on to partnered with Bevana to keep the brand alive. A couple of these beers are still out there. But this was one, we were there before the brewery opened, celebrated all the anniversaries with them and everything. Really enjoyed a lot of their beers. Brian, I know you stocked up before they closed down to have some of their big beers in there. But I think this one was big for us here locally, symbolically, as to the severity of the overall craft beer landscape.
Yeah, it kind of showed us that making these big, like Untappd still shows them having high ratings, but these big barrel-aged beers that once could keep you well flush with cash were not enough to keep you going anymore.
Right.
And the thing is Jason has told us at several points in the past that he was never really making a lot of money on these. He put a lot of resources into them, time and money and the ingredients and all that. And it was kind of a labor of love, a passion of his. And the actual money was at some points, I think he was just breaking even on these beers. And it just didn't seem right. But the problem is to really make money off them, to actually have a viable business model, he would needed to have sold them for much more than he did, and he was already having trouble getting people to buy them at the current prices. And he was trying to keep it super reasonable. So
they weren't inexpensive beers. I mean, those big beers that he did, they were not inexpensive. But there was several years ago, I was talking to a brewer, Peter Kiley, actually from Monday Night Brewing, that he came over from the wine world, and this at the time he commented there were some beers that he wanted to do, but he knew the price he would have to charge if he did what he wanted to do, and he didn't think the market would bear that. We also saw, speaking of Helm's Deep, what was it, a few years ago, they did an event release where tickets were like $50 or $75, and there was a huge backlash, and these are beers that use a ton of ingredients, they're aged forever and ever. And I'm not going to speak for the pro, for or against these kind of prices, but wine, steak, all this other stuff, people pay a high price for quality. So, it's correct. Something that if there's the labor and the ingredients and everything going into it, but that is one thing with craft beer. It's an everyman's kind of hobby. You can get a great beer, or used to be able to get a great beer on the cheap, but that may be something. I'm not sure if it's in your list here, Brian, but maybe just beer prices, that that throughout the challenges we've faced over the last few years, as we see the prices of a 6-pack creeping up and all of that even craft beer that was something that was totally approachable to everybody, even the prices there are getting a little out of hand.
That is a really good point. The inflation has been an issue all throughout this year. I guess that from what I've heard, and I don't follow the markets that closely, but I guess inflation's down towards the end of the year, not nearly as high as it was, but mid-year we had pretty high inflation, I think, for like the first half of the year. So everything was getting more expensive, and breweries were getting pinched because their costs are getting more expensive, their ingredients, but the price that the consumer is willing to pay is not going up. And if anything, it may even be going down because they're getting pinched as well in different places. So really the breweries are winding up swallowing some of the costs, which is, I think, why we've seen so many breweries closing this year when we didn't see them, maybe when we expected during like COVID and such, we didn't see them closing then. I think it's just this price went up and there's not really a relief for it. There's no package out there for people to get inflation relief like there was for like COVID relief. So,
well, I think talking about COVID and the COVID relief, I think, at least for some, I think we just had a bit of a delay there on something that was inevitable. I think some breweries were starting to feel it back when the pandemic hit. And to be honest, some of that, the pandemic money, the COVID money, helped breweries to keep going for a little while. But then when we come out of that, when that money's gone and when consumers are going back as close as possible to normal habits, the breweries just didn't see sales come back like they wanted them to. And breweries continued to open throughout the pandemic. Even this year, although numbers are down, on the net gain of breweries is down, there's still a net positive in the number of new breweries, in the number of breweries across the U.S. So there's more beer out there than there was in 2020 when all of this started. Folks' pockets are tighter than they used to be. And, there's just a lot of reasons that it's a challenge out there.
And I think that the pandemic changed how people behave, because we never saw the return to on-premise drinking the same way we had prior, where it was before COVID. People they drink more at home, basically. That's the new normal, I guess.
Who knows?
It's just
man.
that people
Can we
aren't
use that
going
word
out
anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Everything seems so abnormal anymore. Abnormal is the new normal, I guess. I guess that's the moral of the story here.
Yeah. Nate, how about you, man? How have your habits changed since the plague was set up on us?
I mean, I definitely agree with Brian. I got used to drinking from home a little bit more. And so the thought of going out and staying out and brewery hopping really changed for me. I do still go out to breweries though, but I usually go to pick up more to-go beer or get a taproom exclusive and then bring it home to share with friends. It's no longer that I've got a huge group going down to a brewery with me and we're hanging out for the day. It's more, let me snag something real quick, take it to go, bring it home with me, and then have a party or just have some people over for dinner here.
Yeah, that was something that I think we've talked about on here before, but I don't feel like that even going to a brewery is the same as it was a few years ago. There was a time when I could drop into any brewery in the Atlanta metro and I would see at least 6 or 10 people that I knew very well. Basically I could just roll out on a random weekend, drop into a brewery, and that would be enough to spend a day hanging out with friends. And you don't see that as much as you used to anymore. Maybe it's that people aren't going out as much. Maybe it's that there's so many more breweries that it's more spread out. My 10 friends are now at 10 different breweries on that day, or whatever. But it's different than it was even a few years ago.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. And I'm just wondering, as time goes on, people, for various reasons, it becomes less of a priority to them to go to their local craft beer place or their local pub. So
crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to see more of it. We've got more to talk about on that topic as well. We're going to go chronologically here for now, just to make it easy on our simple minds. It's easy to do it that way. But moving along in the year, we get to April. And Brian, if I had to pick one story that I would say was the biggest in beer, maybe not craft beer, but the biggest in beer and probably the one with the most impact, this is it. This is it. So this is when the Bud Light fiasco began. And for those that don't know, if you're listening to our show, there's very little chance that you don't know this story. But someone in marketing at Budweiser made a can with Dylan Mulvaney, who is a trans activist and YouTuber, with her face on the can.
Yep.
I think only a few were made, maybe a 6-pack or something, but they were made as a special thing, sent out. And Dylan did some post showing off the can. A lot of people didn't like that, Brian. A lot of people didn't like that, Nate. A lot of people got really angry about it. And they did not believe that Bud Light should partner with a trans person at all. They didn't care for it. Now, I totally disagree with that mindset, with hating someone just because of who they are, and with being mad at a company because they chose to partner with someone that you don't agree with their lifestyle. It's different if they partnered with Adolf Hitler, Dylan's not doing anything. Dylan's not doing anything to impact anyone else, So if you make a decision or if you're living how you want to live and living your life, no one has a right to hate you for doing that if you're not doing any harm to them. That's my 2 cents, which is about what it's worth there. But Brian, you got a look. There is a look.
A look, yeah. So I think part of why this exploded is it was reported inaccurately, I believe, that there was a new partnership, and Dylan Mulvaney was going to be the new spokesperson for Bud Light, and that was not the case. And Anheuser-Busch was quick to back away from that, releasing a memo that it was just a few cans. It was a special thing for influencers that they do from time to time and all that. And the problem is that by the time they made that comment, it had already circled the world, and Kid Rock had already shot
up some beer, right?
Shot up some beer in his backyard with some guns. And things went crazy really fast. I'm like, they dropped a significant amount of in sales, like a good 5% or something, almost immediately. It was a significant blip on the radar, and as a result, two of the marketing executives were placed on leave, and eventually, I think that they finally were completely separated from the company, but it was a very quietly, you guys need to go away and be gone. So
then the president,
wild.
The president went on a talk show and gave a very non-response response to things. He's talking about, we care about our employees. We did this and that. He really didn't say anything. This was up in July. It took a while before they really made any comment, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there was a social media post maybe 2 weeks or a month after, and with really not addressing either side. So they chose not to take either side on anything. They didn't defend, Dylan's right to be a person. They didn't say, yeah, we agree with these folks who hate this. We shouldn't have done that. They didn't say, hey, y'all need to chill and let people be people. So they really took a we're staying out of the way stance, and it just didn't go well with anybody. Everybody was upset with them. So if we look back at this, Bud Light needs to know your audience,
Yeah.
Again, I don't agree with this at all, but it's not shocking or surprising that these folks responded the way that they did, knowing what you would think the average Bud Light consumer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not at all surprised. If anything, I'm almost surprised it wasn't even larger than it was. And I think that a fair amount of it is there's only a certain percentage of Bud Light drinkers that even pay attention to the news, probably. So it's entirely possible that some of them only heard rumors and didn't care, because there's a fair amount of just don't care type of people too.
Care. Don't care.
It's weird. It's weird that they lost a lot of business from like people that own gay establishments or trans establishments because of that guy saying these really non-committal things. Like, well, they're not supporting our side either. Like, you're out. So they lost business on both sides. This was amazingly badly handled. So
I mean, he said things like, "Well, we're here about the employees, and we just want our employees to be taken care of, and this and that." He did. The bottom line is he didn't address the issue at hand at all,
Correct.
at all.
Yeah,
and
not
that was
even
something
close.
that was something that both sides wanted, to take a stance, and he did not. Now, in response to this, Ultra Right beer was launched.
Oh yeah.
And there's this fella goes by Conservative Beer Dad. Interestingly enough, he's like one town over from me. And he worked with a contract brewer here in Georgia to make the Ultra Right beer. And unfortunately, it's done very well. His campaign it's an anti-woke beer. And, people are buying into that. Now, they've had some challenges because I've had people reach out to me who have ordered the beer, and there's been trouble getting deliveries on some of these. They did a one with a mugshot, with the Trump mugshot on the can. And I don't know a lot about it. All I know is he launched the beer. He made a very big point to say that he was anti-woke and sick of this. It was in response to the Bud Light, and it did well. There's way more people than there should be that were on board with that. So
yeah, it's really interesting. It as popular as it must have been. I've only ever seen it on shelves one time at one establishment, and I found it interesting to even see it because I'll be honest with you, I wasn't 100% sure it was ever going to actually get made.
I think initially it was all mail order. I don't think it went to distribution. So I think he sold it to be shipped initially, and then it started rolling out. So not seeing it in the stores is not that surprising. But I knew people who have ordered via the website who said that they've ordered like back in September, and as of mid-November, they were still getting emails that, hey, we're waiting on cans. We're trying to get this and that. So, interesting.
Yeah. So
you get yours yet, Nate?
Oh, no, I have not gotten mine yet.
Okay. All right.
We've got a can collecting buddy who I mentioned it to, and I said, I've seen it, and he collects all Georgia made cans, and it was made in Georgia. So I told him where I saw it, and if he wants to pick some up just to collect the cans. He seemed non-committal on it.
Yeah. Understandable though. The guy that Brian's talking about, we're talking every single can that he can get of something made in Georgia. This guy has an insane collection of Breweriana. So especially Georgia related. So would not surprise me and would be an appropriate piece for his collection. That's for
sure. It really would be. It got national headlines. So it's more significant for that reason, just because it was part of a much larger political movement, even if you don't kind of agree with the whole concept behind it. I'm like, it's significant for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Brian, then if we get up to May, going into May, big news for us personally in May. Beer Guys Radio, we left the radio. So our name is now a lie. We're Beer Guys Podcast instead of Beer Guys Radio. But, we had been on the radio 6 years. I guess that would have been right around 6 years. And for those that aren't aware, it's not free to be on the radio. You have to pay licensing fees and syndication fees and all that. And most of the channels we were on, speaking of certain political affiliations, conservative talk is really where most of the talk is. And that was most of our stations out there. And to be honest, with the exception of a couple, shout out to Tallahassee, Florida, and to Vermont, WVMT up in Vermont. We did well with most of those stations and had quite a few listeners in those areas. They were really good. A couple others, we saw some pockets. But overall, we were under pretty strict requirements as to what we could do as far as the format of the show and what we did. And we just felt it was best to make that break and go all podcasts. We didn't see the benefit of continuing to put money into being on the radio. And Brian, I know you admit it, and I got to say I did as well, that part of the hang on for that, it was kind of cool to be on the radio. It was cool. We were nationally syndicated. I think at one time we hit 75 stations, 60, 75. I don't even remember now. At one time I could tell you exactly. But
I think with all the simulcast stuff, we were probably 50, 60, something like that. Yeah. So we had people that caught us in Guam. That's right. That sent us emails and heard us in Guam, which that was super cool being seen out there. But now we get to sit down, we get to chat with you. We don't have to, stick to a radio clock and take a break in the middle of the conversation. We can just keep rambling and running our mouths
for your enjoyment. That's you're welcome. You're welcome for our loudmouths.
Indeed. Yes.
Yeah. And then, something that there's going to be a theme throughout the rest of the year, Brian. In May, AB getting rid of their craft breweries. AB has spent a lot of time the previous years buying up various craft breweries and building their portfolio. But Appalachian Mountain Brewery is the one that they bought back their brewery from AB InBev. So some other moves that were made there, but the owners there, they got their brand back. Constellation Brands exiting the craft beer. They're exiting craft beer. So they got rid of they had Funky Buddha in Florida and Four Corners Brewing Company in Texas. Both of those went back to the original owners. So these big macro brands that were grabbing up these craft breweries, some are going back to who had them before. Funky Buddha was one. I think that was one. That was another one I think people took kind of personal because if you remember Wicked Weed, when AB bought Wicked Weed, there's always been some chatter about craft breweries selling to big beer. And right here, I mean, Terrapin ATL Brew Lab is a sponsor of the show. A lot of these breweries, they have very good reasons for selling. I'd still much, much prefer a local independently owned craft beer, but I go to the Terrapin Atlanta Brewery. I know those guys. They're working in my neighborhood. They're right here in my backyard. I know Spike that owns Terrapin and what he said this did for his, for his company. Not my preference for the way things go, but I don't feel as strongly anti selling out, quote unquote, as I did 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. I get it. But Wicked Weed was so verbal about craft and independence and all this stuff. And then it was almost like overnight. They're like, hey, we sold to AB, And then right after that, they did a video. This was around the time that the Brewers Association released that logo for the independent breweries. It was like a beer bottle upside down. And what's AB's craft? Is it the high end? Is that what they call it?
They call it the high end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, several of the craft brewers that they had just purchased did a video basically saying, hey, y'all, we need to all play together here. We need to unite against wine and spirits. And to me, that just seems so hypocritical to go. They did such a 180. And talking to some of the other breweries in Asheville, the Wicked Weed one, people didn't forget that. That's the local craft community didn't forget that. Funky Buddha, I went off on a huge tangent there, but Funky Buddha was much the same way. They were very craft, and people didn't really like at all that they had been purchased by big beer. So, but now back in, I haven't had them recently, Brian. I don't know if they made a huge change in the quality when they were sold, or if quality has changed again in the other direction since they're back under independent ownership.
I haven't really had much either, and it's the amount of their beer I have had lately has been smaller. I think that there's still a little bit of distro here, or maybe there's some remaining stock. It's been kind of weird with Funky Buddha. So they were definitely a much bigger thing, 5 or 6 years ago than at least in this area. I got to point out that Constellation also, they've made so many bad steps when it came to beer that craft beer, that maybe getting out of craft beer was good, because I think they're sticking kind of to more their Mexican imports. But they're the ones that bought Ballast Point for $1 billion in 2015, and then sold it to Kings and Convicts for like $41 million
or something like that.
$41 million 5 years later. That is really painful to think about. So
crazy.
They have done a very poor job in this. So craft beer is not for them. That's for sure.
Hey, I guess, it only took them $1 billion to realize it, but way to go on figuring that one out, Constellation. Way to go.
Eventually they got it, and they're still afloat. And you know what? Just goes to show how powerful the Mexican import beer market is right now. Like they can take that $1 billion hit, and they're still just chugging along. They sold off the brands that they weren't servicing well anyway, and they're chugging along. Okay.
As we go through these stories, Brian, I realize that a lot of the biggest stories in craft beer had to do with big beer getting their hands in the pot there. So a lot of the stories are attached to that and related, Brian. As we move into July, a big one that is still playing out right now, But Brian, I think you put it very well. Very well. Sapporo destroys an American icon. Sapporo shut down Anchor Brewing Company. And again, I'm drinking this is probably one of the few cans left, Brian, or not anymore, was one of the few cans left of the Anchor Steam beer. But that is another one I think for a lot of people symbolically, even though I can't say anything, Brian, I can't complain too much. In the last decade, probably Anchor Christmas is the only Anchor beer that I have purchased. So, I'm sure, just like we talked about earlier with the Fat Tire, there's people whose steam beer was their go-to. I'm sure, locals there where the brewery was were a lot more attached to it. Me, it was about the nostalgia. It was about what it stood for. Fritz Maytag buying the brewery and really, one of the first craft breweries, some of the pioneers. So to see someone who had so much meaning in craft beer in general be closed by a big mega brewery just, because it doesn't fit into the balance sheet anymore sucks.
Yeah, and it just seemed like it was handled so poorly. It was kind of, it seems like they went out of their way. Now, there was the claim at the time when it came out that it had been losing money since 2016. It had just been losing market share, losing money, and there were attempts that they claimed to have made to sell it. But it also seems like they went out of their way to quickly announce that they were closing it down and quickly putting it into a special kind of alternative, and I forget what that was called, to the chapter, the various bankruptcies. I think I got it in my notes. Assignee to liquidate the business assets. It's called the California Assignment for the Benefit of Creditors. So it's an entirely different thing that they went through, and it seemed like it was almost designed to prevent the employees of the brewery that were interested in buying it. They were not presented with that option. And that's something that came out quickly, is they were working on they had very little notice that this was happening, and they were quickly trying to see what resources they could put together to buy the brewery and keep it running, which would have been ideal. And I guess is still a possibility based on the emails I've seen, even this much later than the announcement. So,
they started like a GoFundMe type of campaign to raise funds. So I think they got a long road ahead of them to try and make that happen. It seems difficult, unlikely. I wish them the absolute best, and I would hope that if they're still going at it, then they have a plan. They're not going into this blind, not knowing what they're getting into. So hopefully
they have a lot of support. And I think the last email I saw is they needed additional funding to keep it moving. So I think it's not dead. And I know there was some sort of a strange update saying that I think they were piecing out the brewery to make it very difficult to buy the whole thing and make it run again. I think the property went up for sale separately, and I think that was announced I want to say October-ish. I don't have that in my notes, so I think it's still possible though they could all come back together and work again. But it seems increasingly like a long shot. But I haven't heard anybody say it has been sold, so I don't know.
Right, haven't heard the final word yet. So that's another thing. We've heard a lot of the breweries that have closed have commented that rent prices are really getting them. We saw, increases in rent announced by several, and this isn't brand new. Our friend Crawford Moran, when he closed Slice and Pint 6 years ago now or something, I don't know. But when he closed it, he mentioned it was due to a rent hike, when 5 seasons. So this isn't something that's new, but it's getting worse, and a lot of these breweries, especially in Georgia, and I think this kind of happened a lot around the country until laws changed, until craft beer started becoming more popular. But until laws changed in Georgia, it was not uncommon at all for a brewery to go into kind of a lower rent industrial park kind of place. Because in Georgia, the way you made money from beer was distribution.
Correct.
You weren't looking to get people into your tap room until 2017. You weren't looking to get people into your tap room to drink. You were wanting to brew and get it out to the taps. So these places went into some of these places. When craft beer got popular, people started coming to the breweries, hanging out, and a lot of these places were revitalized because of craft breweries coming in there. and them helping these places to be successful price them out of their own rent in these locations. We look at a recent case. We look at it, Monday Night Brewing, when they opened the garage location down in Atlanta's West End, they were the first tenant in that huge building there, and now there's an entire beverage destination, I guess is probably a fair way to say it. There's 3 breweries, a distillery, kombuchery, restaurants and all that. But, someone had to take that plunge, and the craft brewers were the ones to do it, and they're paying the price for that now. And I think it sucks. And Brian, the reason I rambled all this in regards to Anchor Brewing, that building and location in San Francisco has to be insanely valuable there. So I could see someone wanting the brewery and just that land and building pricing them out of everything else. So
I saw it mentioned somewhere that that whole area is a big hot spot for artificial intelligence startups, and there was the speculation that the property would be bought and a startup would take over and use that facilities for artificial intelligence. So go from beer to artificial intelligence, maybe. Again, haven't heard anything about the property being sold yet, so it's unknown what's happening. And
I hope whatever happens that they're able to survive, revive, pull a Lazarus move, whatever you want to call it at this point. But I would like to see Anchor Brewing continue. And again, just for me, it's purely the symbolic nature of what they stand for in craft beer.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Fun. Well, not really. That's the wrong thing to say, Tim. Not fun at all. So yeah, again, in July, just more continuation of the AB stuff. They AB gave away free beer for the 4th of July. They did so many things to try and encourage people, to get their beer. Not going to give that any more time, but they keep trying to pull little things. So this is a story. The next one is something, Brian, that we've talked about probably for a couple years now. And we talked when, I think it was earlier this year when we did Little Beer Fest over in Duluth. We had Augie Carton on the show from Carton Brewing up in New Jersey. And he was talking about the laws there. And he mentioned, he was on with us with John Hall from All About Beer. And they mentioned coming into Atlanta and leaving the airport and going to Halfway Crooks Brewing. And he's like, I wonder if I'll be able to get something to eat there. And he's like, oh, of course I will, because this is a normal state. Now, that's a recent change, Augie. But anyhow, in New Jersey, you can't do that. So they can have food trucks, but they can't even tell you if they've got a food truck. You got to kind of show up and maybe it's there or not. I don't know the details of the laws. I know they're crazy. And I know that's one example that Augie gave us. I know that with the way licensing works there's like a finite number of liquor licenses, and people can set on these things. They can pay the renewal fee and not open it. So if someone by chance had 4 licenses for some reason, or I don't know if that's possible. I'm kind of speaking out. But if they had a license and they didn't want someone else to be able to open, they could just pay the renewal fee and set on that thing. They don't have to open it. And that was one thing that they were trying to I believe the governor wanted changed when the governor of New Jersey vetoed a bill. He vetoed a beer bill to change these crazy laws in New Jersey. Now that sounds worse, I think, Brian, than what it actually is, or maybe good intentions there with bad results. But he wanted more changes done. And one of the things he wanted done was the state's ability to pull a license. If someone was renewing it, a non-used license, to be able to pull that from someone rather than letting them just, pay and renew it like that. But the punchline to this, that is news that just came out this month, is due to the veto, it doesn't look like they're going to get back in to make the changes that the governor wants in order to be able to pass and sign the bill, unless the state of New Jersey gets some relief from the Alcohol Beverage Commission. Then these old, very stringent laws will go back into effect January 1st. And they've had a little bit of a reprieve. They got to pass like a 6-month pass or something while they were looking at this, looking at this bill. But since the bill was not signed into law, those expire at the end of the year. And the restrictive laws are going to go back into effect come January 1st.
Yep. Unless there's some sort of a last minute ditch effort to save it, and it seems unlikely. But I guess anything is possible when people are. I don't know. I think there's a lot of posturing that governor really wants some things, and maybe he'll get it. Maybe last minute the pressure will be enough that the people bring him something that he'll decide to sign. I'm sure he'll give ground on some things, but yeah, it's going to be a mess there, man. I do not envy anybody who enjoys beer in New Jersey right now.
I feel bad rough for the brewers there. I mean, we've seen the restrictive laws. We're still trying to improve our laws here in Georgia. But things are crazy all over the place. Every state has some things. New Jersey sounds pretty bad. But Brian, before we move on, let's thank our sponsors, the folks that help us to pay the bills here at Beer Guys Radio to cover our costs to keep the show going. You know, we've almost made it through 2023. I was going to say we made it through, Brian, but not quite. There's still time. There's still time. But if you do make it through 2023, you definitely deserve some new beer for the new year. So our friends at Terrapin Brewery Atlanta always keep some new stuff on tap. I recently chatted with our buddy Mark over there. He was telling me about all the cool stuff they're doing and a few of the new beers that they've got on there, newer beers on there. One they've got on is Gold Glove. This is a deep gold, crisp, and malty Dortmunder lager. He said it's incredibly balanced drinkability and 5.5% ABV. So got a little bit there for you, but not too strong. Now, something we're going to talk about this story a little bit more, Brian. Kokua project that we talked about earlier in the year. Big story, a massive multinational collaboration with this brew to support the Maui wildfire efforts and the cleanup from the results there. Right now, Terrapin Brewery Atlanta has their version of Kokua Untappd, and again, supports those in Maui. And this is a sessionable IPA. They mentioned that it has bright notes of passion fruit and pineapple from Mosaic hops. Now, if we're talking hops, Brian, there's still new hops coming out there. So if we want to talk some of the good stuff going on in beer, there's new hops always happening out there. One that is new this year is called Vista. Now, it's been around under part of the USDA's public breeding program for a few years now, but this is the first year that this hop has been more widely commercially available. Well, our buddies at Terrapin got some of this. They have brewed a beer called Farm System, and this is a fresh hop IPA, again, brewed with this Vista hop variety. And when they tasted this was back in 2019 when brewers did a blind tasting of this hop. They noted tropical fruit, tangerine, melon, pear, and green tea, Brian. So I think a lot of the popular hops right now, we get those tropical, juicy flavors in there. But when you bring in some of those unique notes in there, like a green tea or the pear and melon, it's really finite differences that separate some of these. But, you know, fun to check them out and see what's going. So, again, they've got it over there, Farm System on tap. Go up there, whether it's the old year or the new year, get you a beer. Maybe go there both. You probably want a beer on both sides of 2024. But go on, have a seat at the bar, order up a pint, tell them the beer guy sent you. And as always, thanks to our friends at Terrapin Brewery Atlanta for sponsoring the show.
And so, of course, like you were saying, a new year is upon us. And I think it's got people thinking about resolutions. And you could join the hordes of people hitting the gym in January, thinking that 2024 is the year you're finally going to become that professional bodybuilder you've always dreamed of being. More power to you if that's your thing. But I'm going to tell you what my resolution is for 2024. I like to set myself up for success. So it's one I'm pretty sure I can stick to. I resolve to have a new beer every time I visit Truck and Tap. That means, for example, if I were to drop by the Woodstock location of Truck and Tap today, instead of ordering that Creature Comforts Double Cocoa Bunny that I've had many times and really enjoy and will definitely recommend, I would instead order something I've not had, like Omegang's Three Philosophers Nitro, like the Nitro's key there. I've not had that. I know this is going to be an easy resolution to keep because each Truck and Tap location has 20 beers to choose from, and the selections are always changing. There's always a new beer on tap at Truck and Tap. And of course, you don't need to make a resolution to visit Truck and Tap. You can just drop by any of their locations, Woodstock, Alpharetta, Duluth, or Lawrenceville, whenever you want and have whatever beverage suits you. It doesn't even have to be beer. You can have some wine or a cocktail or just, it's bourbon. You can just have bourbon if you want. When you show up, just let them know that the beer guys sent you, for your visit. So yes, thank you to Truck and Tap for the sponsoring. We appreciate you. We love you guys.
No more beer for Brian. He's having trouble there. So
that's right.
Brian will not be visiting Truck and Tap just for a little while. He's going to take
tonight.
It easy
not tonight.
Just a minute there. Yeah. So thanks, y'all. We appreciate it. Brian, moving right along. This is an interesting one. I think a big theme this year. Closers, mergers, acquisitions, sell-offs, rebuys. I think that's really the big thing here. But looking into August, Tilray Brands bought 8 beer and beverage companies from Anheuser-Busch. So as AB was looking to sell off their portfolio, some going back to the original owners, Tilray purchased those. And Tilray has fairly quietly, I don't think there's been a lot of hype around this, but they are now, by the Brewers Association definition, the 5th largest craft brewer in the United States. You know, they have Sweetwater, Alpine, Green Flash. I don't even remember all of them right now, but, you know, in addition to the ones that they've recently purchased from AB.
Yeah, they've got they picked up Shock Top in this deal that they just did. It was $85 million for 8 craft brands, and some of them aren't breweries, or they're not beer breweries. There's a cider company, there's an energy drink company, but Shock Top, Breckenridge Brewery, Blue Point Brewing, 10 Barrel, Red Hook, Widmer, which I'm really hoping to see Widmer show up at the local tap room here, because that's one that takes me back, especially that Widmer Hefeweizen.
Classic,
and the
old vintage.
Yeah. And they've got Square Mile Cider Company and Highball Energy. Those were the 8 they bought up. So yeah, they're growing like gangbusters. It's crazy. And they're getting these for a deal. $85 million for all these. It's just nuts.
I mean, it's crazy. Like we were talking about with Ballast Point, you know, it bought for $1 million, sold for $1 billion, sold for $41 million. Just absolutely insane there. So I'm curious to see what Tilray is up to next. Are they done? Or are they keeping an eye out for what's next? I mean, they're all over weed and beer. So, you know, they've got that going on.
It'd be interesting. So I would guess that I haven't studied their portfolio, but I would be thinking they'd be looking at any regions of the country that they don't have as strong a footing in, and they would be possibly looking to add there if they're continuing to add. But they just bought 8, and I think that there might be some time where they need to integrate these companies and get everything working properly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took their time with it. But you know what? Hey, if you can get more breweries for a discount, maybe you do that. I don't know. I really don't know how that works. So I hope it works out for them. It's pretty amazing.
I know last time you and I went down to the Sweetwater tap room, they did have Green Flash and Alpine beers on tap. And that was probably a month after this purchase. And none of the other brands were there yet. So I'm sure it does take a little while. Or one other, I think. Didn't they have like some
Montauk.
6 or 12 packs? Montauk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Montauk was there. Yeah, a couple of those. Yes.
Yeah. So, but we'll look and see. Like I said, see if maybe Widmer and some of the others. What was Widmer's bourbon? I think it was BRRRBON.
Yeah, that was a good one too. Yeah. The Hefeweizen and the bourbon. Yeah.
Those were hype beers 12 years ago. Probably, somewhere in there,
like a decade ago. You know, the Hefeweizen was going back even further, back when Hef was the big style. That's 20 years ago. Probably
90s?
More.
Back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You remember the 90s, Nate?
Somewhat.
He was wearing underoos. He was wearing underoos.
I was wearing underoos back in the 90s.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Rolling on, Brian, I don't know this is one of the biggest beer stories of 2023 or not, but you thought it was significant. So you had a little revelation there in October, right?
Oh yeah, I took a new job and people were asking me about beer, and I realized when I was answering the question that my favorite beer style really isn't IPA anymore. It's the German Pilsner. I just realized that's the one Now, I still drink plenty of IPA. I still like IPA, but I got to say that given the choice, I'm probably going to pick the Pilsner most of the time. It dawned on me in October when I was being asked about it. I'm like, oh my God, I don't love IPA more than everything else anymore. I don't know when it happened exactly, but that's when I realized it. So big news for me, big personal news.
Yes. And you know what, Brian? Sometimes those are the most important news stories. I am glad that you had a revelation in October. I hope it has been fruitful and made you a better person.
I think it has.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Now, I mean, as a sidebar to you discovering that you liked, German pills, Creature Comforts. This was a big story, and I think even though Georgia related, I think the overall message here was pretty big. So earlier in the year, was this even going into 2022, Brian, when they started the union efforts? So a group of Creature Comforts employees got together and fast forward a couple of steps, but they formed BUG, the Brewers Union of Georgia. And they were trying to unionize Creature Comforts. A lot of back and forth. There was a lot of accusations from the people at BUG. Creature Comforts, of course, remained fairly silent. They retained an attorney that is known to help avoid union efforts, basically, and went to defend this. Of course, a lot of what actually happened isn't going to be known to the public. Creature Comforts is not the type that's going to put their dirty laundry out there. They're going to take care of business. But the end to all of this was in October. They did get a vote for the union, and that vote failed. Yeah. So after all this hubbub going on, and I think, Brian, my personal take in this day and age is that if a union vote fails, that says a lot. That really speaks volumes, because to be quite honest, with a lot of the people in the workforce, especially, Brian, in service industry or industrial related jobs, unionization is very appealing. The thoughts of what you could get out of that. So for whatever reason, we don't know the inner workings on it, but I think it says quite a lot that the union vote failed there at the brewery.
Yeah, I think it does. I really do. And there was and I'm curious how much this figures into it, but somebody on Reddit, I think it was fairly anonymously, commented that some people voted against the union because the union wasn't clear about their communicating what they were demanding, and that there was some stuff going on that they were non-transparent about. There was a comment about secretly electing a non-employee president of the union, and I could see
weird.
We're thinking about forming a union, getting leadership that doesn't know anything about the brewery, somebody from the outside, seems strange to me. So, it's. I wonder. And here's the thing: when they talk about founding the union initially, before it was known that Creature Comforts wasn't going to embrace them, they were talking about spreading the ethos, the spirits, the values of Creature Comfort to other breweries in Georgia. It was kind of this interesting messianic kind of message that they had. And then things changed very quickly when Creature Comforts didn't embrace them. So it's very odd. And it did seem like Creature Comforts was kind of trying to be the ideal employer as a brewery in the state already, and it seemed weird to me that would be the place that you would choose to unionize. So anyway,
that's Brian, it's hard to read into what's being said in an internet post, or things like that.
Yeah, true.
We know several of the owners, managers, taproom workers at Creature Comforts. Based on all of my interaction with them, I was shocked to hear that they were the brewery that unionized ahead of any others. Because someone speaks, talks a good talk doesn't mean they necessarily practice what they preach. But in all of my dealings with the guys there, with the crew there, they always seem legit, in my opinion. Bug's post, when they came out, something didn't set right with me. And again, Brian, I'm going off of an internet post, so you got to be careful saying this or that or anything, because I don't know the inner workings of what's going on. But some of the things that we're saying, and like you saying, well, like your comment about them wanting to take the ethos of Creature Comforts, we believe that they can be, certain choice words that they use there. But it went from this talk to fairly accusatory and angry fairly quickly. And they never publicly said a whole lot about what they wanted out of the union, and they were trying to get a lot of public support. But beyond we want to unionize, there wasn't a lot said to garner public support. And apparently not just the public, but, like that person mentioned on Reddit, they just didn't have enough to confidently vote in the union there. So it was an interesting ride, I think. And who knows if it's over yet?
It's possible it's not. I think there was some possibility of their appealing the decision that was made or something like that. But I think that they also had the downside of the people starting the union didn't have any experience working with unions. So it was kind of, they were figuring it out as they went. So they did have that disadvantage. If their messaging wasn't right, I mean, it's possible that it could have been at least partly because they weren't sure how to do these things. They'd never done it before. So, giving them the benefit of the doubt, because I don't know. There's a lot we don't know. We're on the outside of the story.
If you're going for something like unionizing, then you either need to know what you're doing, or you need to be really good buddies with somebody who does.
Yes.
So interesting. Well, Brian, as we roll into the last couple of months of the year, it's been spicy in the beer world. Last couple of months. There's been a lot of drama, controversy, something again tied locally, but not just dealing with local breweries. But we've talked about Bevana several times on here. We had Aaron Gore on earlier in the year. Aaron was an employee of Bevana. I would say part that adds to the spiciness here. Although there was no public comment made as to why, Aaron did resign from Bevana earlier this year, a couple of months ago. But we have seen Pontoon Brewing here in Georgia. They had to close their doors. They said, hopefully temporarily, depending on what they could work out. But they directly said that it had to do with a partnership not paying them six figures that they owed them, that the financial hit was there. Some other places did stories that dove deeper into what was going on with Bevana, but it sounds like there was a lot of undelivered promises for what they could accomplish with brewers. And as we dug into this, Brian, I believe the story was that Good Beer Hunting that did the big kind of deep dive on Bevana there.
Yeah, it was Good Beer Hunting. Yeah.
But their plan was increasing sales through distribution and national accounts. I think we know from being attached to craft beer, distribution is not the way to go grow a brewery right now. And finding national chain accounts for a portfolio of fairly unknown breweries other than in their local markets it seems like their business model was flawed on what their growth plans were. And it sounds like the promises that they made to some of the other breweries did not pan out the way they told them would in the terms of sales volume. But there's a lot of lawsuits involved from brewers to this. The bank is accusing the parent company of selling off some assets that were used to secure a loan and not paying back their debt. So there's just a lot going on with Bevana right now. And I think it still remains to be seen how that shakes out. Yeah,
it's very interesting. They seem to still be moving the beer along. I still see, Orpheus out there. They've partnered with them. So some of the Orpheus that's still on the market right now is being produced through Bevana. And Jester King, I've seen things about them. Yeah. So that they seem to be very happy with the program. So not everybody involved with Bevana has had a bad experience. Jester King, I think, has got distribution to a lot of states now that they didn't have before through Bevana, which is handy for them. But it seemed to me like you were saying, that model, it needed a tremendous amount of volume. Like it would have played out well if the volume was there, but you needed volume and you needed demand. So you needed larger breweries to be working on this, and you needed the demand that was like craft beer in 2016 and 2017. Right. You needed that kind of demand to support it. So it would have worked in that case, but we're not in that world anymore.
Nope, not at all. Brian, some others, Treehouse Brewing owners are being sued there, said that they were pulling money. They weren't giving minority shareholders the stake that they deserve there. A lot going on with Treehouse. Brian, I've lost my notes, but there was a brewery in Colorado that went through a very similar situation where they said there was misappropriation of funds from a former manager. There's a lot of lawsuits going on in craft beer right now. A lot of accusations and lawsuits there. So
I think it's a matter
crazy stuff.
I think it's a matter of as things get tighter and you have to look at the books and figure out how to make ends meet, you start seeing stuff that looks a little hinky. And that's where some of the stuff that I'm not saying anybody's actually done anything wrong here because I don't know. I can't know this. But that's where you reveal these issues and then you realize, oh, somebody has been stealing. And that's where you go to court. And but when money is flowing in hand over fist, just dump truckloads of money, you're not worried about it. So that's where you can get away with stealing money. It's times like these that show it. And
when you're sharpening that pencil, right?
Yeah. The inflation is the tide has gone out, and you can see everything that's there on the beach, and then you see where people are stealing. Maybe. Possibly, allegedly stealing. Yeah,
that's like they'll catch someone on camera shooting somebody, and they'll be like the alleged shooter. I was like, that's right, literally right there, right there.
He gives a peace sign to the camera, like allegedly
holds up his driver's license, and so
that's right.
That's it. He's just accused right now. No one's been convicted. So
that's right.
Well, guys, those were some of the big stories throughout the year. We had a lot of fun. We talked about a ton of stuff. There were some themes that I think we harped on a little bit that kind of stuck with us. So, some personal passion projects or maybe just things that entertain us. Brian, what was the thing for you this year?
It was a I think the thing that I was most interested in follow the closest this year was probably the Anchor saga and the destruction of an American icon by it's a company that seems to be just completely clueless as to how important that is. So that seemed to be the big story for me, the one I was always looking for some sort of an outcome to, and I'm kind of sad that we don't have an idea as to how it's actually going to end yet. It's still unknown. Maybe we'll know in 2024 if that even is a real year. We'll find out what's going to happen then.
We'll see.
So,
Nate, how about you? What was your thing for 2023?
It really was the Bud Light fiasco because I was amazed at how much market share they had lost as a result of a marketing plan that a new executive tried to enact. And it just blew my mind. They did everything except apologize, or they did everything except like they tried to give away beer. They were offering mail-in rebates on beer if you sent them their receipts. They did everything except just take responsibility for their actions and just try and make it right for one of the sides.
Yeah, either side.
Good point, Nate, that, hey, we got free beer here. They were giving, big incentives to distributors and stuff, tried everything they could. Hey, it's 4th of July. Get you some free Bud Light. Yeah. Hey, could you just apologize? Free beer.
No,
free beer. Would you like a puppy? So they were putting live puppies in 12 packs of Bud Light. I don't know if anybody knew that, but you got
I didn't see that.
Free puppy in your 12 pack of Bud Light. So but I never really thought about it exactly like that. It's like we've tried literally nothing and it just hasn't worked.
That's right.
Crazy. I think something that entertained me throughout the year, there's a lot of negativity, but y'all, I had some fun talking Micheladas this year. My Midwest Michelada, other variations on it. I drank several this year, had some good taco spots here. I don't think it was this year, but at our friend's Good Word Brewing, I asked them if they did a Michelada one time, and the bartender's like, well, we can. And I saw him where we were sitting. I could see the bartender mixing it, and he mixed it up and he put a straw in it and took some out. If you've ever seen the way a bartender does, they'll pull some up in a straw to taste it and see how it was. And he tasted it and he shook his head and he dumped it in the sink. And I'm like, you know what, man, that says a lot right there. If he's like, nope, this isn't the one. This isn't the one. Mm-hmm. He redid it. And I'm going to tell y'all, it was one of the best Micheladas I've had in my life. But that being said, I'm also okay with just a beer and some V8 juice with maybe some salt, pepper, and hot sauce. I'm totally okay with that. Nate, do not ever put Underberg in my Bloody Mary or Michelada again. I don't know why that was a thing, but
it tasted so good.
We're gonna try. We found. I'm trying to remember the name of the Twitter account. I think it maybe be Irish Beer History. was the Twitter account, but they posted a pamphlet that Guinness had in the 70s talking about various concoctions. And one they had, I think it was called the Redhead, which is a mix of Guinness and tomato juice. And y'all, I like the Micheladas. I'm going to try that. I think I'm going to hate it, but I'm going to try it. So, and Brian, you and I went out last weekend and we went to a kind of a European pub, I guess British, Irish, kind of a little of both there. But they had the one that was cola.
Yeah, Trojan Horse.
The Trojan Horse. And we tried that. You know what? Those are pretty complimentary flavors. That played well together there.
It worked, which is crazy.
That one did.
I wasn't sure what to make of it. I was going to attempt to do that Redhead or whatever the heck that was. And I brought a can, but it turns out it was that it was a vegetable juice.
The V8 blend. Juice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been like a Michelada made with Guinness. Madness. I don't know. That still might have been all right, but so I haven't tried that yet.
You have to get some Guinness and tomato juice and give it a shot. See what you can do there.
I need to do that. Yeah. This makes me think about the spaghetti that we talked about.
Oh yes,
excessively.
Okay. Yeah,
especially during the summer. And I even went out and bought some Miller Lite just to make spaghettis, and I was experimenting with a couple different ways of doing that. Yeah, for a minute. For a minute, that was a hot thing. I was kind of obsessed with the spaghetti. So
not for a minute. I had a 12-pack of spaghetti last night with other people, not just by myself.
I was like, party on, Nate.
Wow,
party on,
nice.
Nate. Good stuff, man. Nate, any predictions for beer in 2024?
We saw reports from the Brewers Association about brewery openings versus brewery closings. And while it was close, it was still in the positive. I think next year we're going to see that opening and closing be even or in the negatives. I think more breweries are going to close next year than we'll see open.
All right. Brian, any thoughts, predictions?
I think that
is that the right
I think that we will continue to see the lagers and the proliferation of lagers and everything to do with lagers, and that's going to continue to be a thing. I think it's going to continue to be popular. I think that we may start to see more casks, like that article we had recently, I think earlier, like at the beginning of this month, more cask beer and more focus on the value of foam in beer and what it provides and how to properly pour your lagers and anything else that you're doing. I think that we'll see a lot of that. Nitro may in fact make the comeback. I've already started seeing it more places than I have in a while. So I think that's what we're going for. I think the quality of the pour and the lighter beers, the lagers, we're getting away from pastry and intense flavors, probably, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. I think we'll continue to see lagers going. The Pilsner, it's here. People are loving it. I've been predicting for 7 years that it was the next big thing. And I guess if you do it long enough, if you luck up, then maybe it will. Brian, I'm going to go against you on cask ales. I do not think the American consumer is going to get on board with that on a large scale. I think it's going to be a little something you see at a few places where diehards that really love cask ales go to get their cask ales. I just don't think that's something that the American consumer is going to buy into. There'll be you and Owen Ogletree and the 5 other people in Atlanta that love cask ales that will show up at places. And you know what? We've got 2 cask mark certified places in the Atlanta metro, Brickstore Pub and Good Word Brewing, and they do very fine cask ales if that's your thing. I am not personally sold on cask ales, although there's a couple cask ales I've had that I thought were stellar. I'm not sold on that being the thing, and I don't think the American consumer will be as well. So let's see. Let's catch back up in a year and see where we stand with that. Now, I've got an interesting, I don't know if I'm going to call it a prediction or a hope for 2024. And something I've seen recently is that more breweries in the Atlanta area are getting pinball machines.
Oh,
and I think that's something. Pinball is having a moment. For those that aren't aware, maybe over the last year, pinball started to come back, more popularity. There's pinball arcades opening up again, breweries and bars. Some bars that used to have half a dozen arcade machines have got rid of all of those and put in pinball machines. I think also that's good for craft beer that pinball's having a moment, because people are looking for stuff to do at their breweries. And if pinball is cool, it could be a good way to lure some people in. I've seen a few of the breweries here that have the pinball machines, and leagues get together there. There's an overall league that meets in various places around Atlanta. There's a ladies only pinball league that does competitions and stuff. So there's my prediction that I want to see. I'm hopeful. Let's see how that plays out over the next year. And, some places have 1 or 2 machines, 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. But as someone who likes both pinball and beer, I'm on board. I'm hopeful that we may see more of this.
I would definitely like to see that. That would be a nice attraction. Something to do while you're enjoying your beer. Yes.
And Brian, since you asked, Schoolhouse Brewing in Marietta does have the Monster Bash remake machine, which is a very good one. Okay. So we should take a trip sometime soon and check it out. All right.
I'll have to check that out.
Well, y'all, that is the year in beer. That is, God willing, we'll see you in 2024. We hope 2023 has been pretty good to you, or at least not horrible to you. We've got, there was a comment right as we got on Instagram that our friend at Firewater Brewing said a lot of good friends lost breweries this year. You know what? We want to send out our heartfelt thoughts and thanks to those that did lose their breweries this year. We had a lot of personal friends here in Georgia. Scott Hadeen, who's been on the show several times with Burnt Hickory Brewery, he had to close down. Jason Pellet, Jason Santamaria was Second Self Brewing.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but Atlanta Brewing and Red Brick, it sounds like they're just not coming back. I'm very disappointed that they went out kind of half-heartedly with we're coming back, because I think that brewery deserved a proper send-off. And I think if they had announced we're closing, they could have had one last hurrah. But the way they did it was kind of uneventful with, we plan to come back, and it didn't happen. And I think it was a dishonorable death to a Georgia craft beer pioneer.
Agreed.
That's all we got for you. Have a happy new year. Enjoy some good beers. Pop a Saison instead of champagne. Get you a nice bubbly Saison to ring in the new year. And, have a good time with it. As always, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. We love having you here. Don't forget to drink local. Cheers.